An iomadh dói ha nagó seo go riadnach dí gin gan Trusadh anoch. Who among us doesn't owe a huge debt to the teachers, tutors and mentors who share their talents and passions with us? This next...
Music a bogsa go fhèin, agus sin thóir ag pácin na gceanna go duine achas a scór. Agus chríd dú ach an nuaid a chláin a chaith an Duaisean Gordon.
The duine gasta go ríadú an Gordon, ha ddíadach go má bhuaach is ha go má cluicheadair is ha ddíadach chu déanach cluicheach na daine agus cluicheach duine san bíd a thuh ceall.
Hesan it cheeks tar duine cultivating the Skerrvore, Skipinnish and Gunna Sound.
I didn't know whether I was getting an award or not because there's 3 or 4 folk in each category and their names are all laid out. And I thought, well, okay, I'll go. And I laboured through the snow and ice to get to Perth.
Please, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for this year's Music Tutor of the Year, Gordon Connell.
And to my surprise, I won it.
Saoghal ha duine ann a ha trothegus agus cuairle I brosnach uch duineog go bhí gáil spéis agus tlach ga ceòl. Is eilean hirúch únjin I hilan in isteich a ha laie yes eilean holle. Hat se mich a sech kiad nech a furach in eilean iasal horach seo. Wat in daichid blione eras, hanig Gordon Connell hirúch, agus ha vi chugus gewachse I den eilean veg ceòlvar seo van Duaisean.
Ha sech kiad is tríchid duine an tíig agus ha ceir cliù acinne. So as un strach an na glasach o ha mór an luch ciúil acinne tíing amach. Agus céistean simar a ha sin. Sim a bhechsa go bhfuil da freigist ann. A chiad freigist go cínseach sé Gordon Connell a ann.
Is heel eilean Nederland, waar ceòl leun, gedoegesig maar geweest, waar chiúiliche neun as er een appalaatje na goedjelen. Gaan ik er ook schijn het al doen en zwaar uurster met je. Ik koets waar chiúiliche neun weer cliù boxigjes. Dus ik wil zo naar eilean, ja, mijn kinderen kunnen een schilder tegen het toeschakelig uurster met je. Accordions gezonricht en melodies. Ik wil nader, de roep een misje. Ik doe niet te sleeuw en mijn jongste met je naar geheen kunnen duizen zo gaat ik af. Zou maar zeggen, de cliù. Agus, en dan mijn kindje maar goed je zo ach, han ik hoop dus Jeffer zelfs kieurig in steeds boeig ik lucht recht kan naar de show zo'n koeik belieren. Agus bhí cála ann. Mar a háisich misidal gona damhasach an únéir go sáiriiste mar iomadh bheith is an sáiriiste me. Agus siad chu dhééisan cálan bhí chéile bheith Gordon Connell ann mar second box bheith mar cluich Bhogsa agus Stuart Langley in a drúbaiche. Agus an dhé sin a gás sinne suas agus bhat me.
Well, it does, I would say it does go back hundreds of years because the accordion is merely a vehicle for playing the music on. Whether it's an accordion or a bagpipe, a tin whistle or a Jew's harp, it doesn't really matter to me. The music on Tiree very much comes from the depth of the tradition that was there, going back hundreds of years. And the fact that accordion playing is so popular on Tiree to the extent it is nowadays is almost purely down to Gordon Connell.
agus an dé a chocag fa fér hiú go sáiríte marí ómand féin ionsiste ríist agus fa is an I chéad duine bheit ar a fáil agus an dúnah dansaighin. Chula seachcan bheit tíing an dróh a dansach an an tíig. Má dulgan scóil ag aiche ciúil na oigraí bica dolas teachan ástúla cluich agus sad cluich and agus stelh in na ástach na casan fan carichan agus dul brip. Ha thula duine cho mesel luch ceol dansaigh an an tíig. Agus ha mí smain go bhfuil sin a chur a taring na luch ciúil cluich go sáiríte cluich an Bhogsa sin an instrument nas principaliche an san eilean.
Sé bogsa car hánig má dhéideach ha mis a smain má de rúca mis gan fíb agus go fiol a bheith mar a spíhampa gar cluich. Ha mis smain gan hánig bogsa car Duaisean má is a go dréamh cíal. Bogsa cin beag ann fa mór an de gúine cluich bogsa cin beag ach sé fiol agus a fíb is periúsal blí ha mis smain gan ann.
Tá damsa agus ceol ag críú cúltar in eilean agus daibh idir na damsadan agus an luch ciúil.
Channeil dadéile hat taichan ásta ann a channeil cinema na tálichan éile channeil dadéile rí dhéanach ach dansa. Agus sin far a bhéil na háigraí folamhrí chéile agus cruinnichug agus channeilánach dansa fatan dúil.
Is gan éil san grinne a duine cáil a sin óg. Tá dansa uhamasach me. Tá tug of the spirits, tá ceol leon, tá glúasid, tá ámasach fálan. Agus a bharcha sin ha cáineachach bhí sin óg agus ha mé cínseach go duine. Het toch goed dansje na zo'n laatste nog laten.
Okay, remember what I said to you about the last line? We could do the wee harmony bit. You won't have a go at it. Just, well, I'll give you a shout. Okay, just the last line only.
Gordon Connell car a hoog sin den duaich va sich mór an gúine é tún hostas a Bhogsa. Chais mór an you hat so wat you fé go dúach ach leich fé dhéan nach de réing car ich hersú me ach ag dé go wat chuú at posta I Bhogsa é taobh Gordon.
And the double notes.
Ba mis ring bí bliana cóí Gordon bhar chan blianach sé dé go go siad a seach a heachcha in a bhí Checkers sa scór ons na late classes. Gat is ganging cha porning go chuí a creos gun duine ba Gordon ba an mátar is. I go a cuiche ba go mai sechat ba bás sin a duine ná a charach chuú at posta sa Bhogsa. De fé unne bhacmsa Harvard at headways would be I thought he stoich nach head over the year she doich kerste vakken bigger trade doich and you listen.
She dunne luch pongal irisil díchalach a hán agus bhaid Checkasc bliana is dé bliana seachcan is dé seachcain agus gun Checkah ha míhfuilach mar Checkasc.
That's good. Okay. No, I just came to teach and the accordion kind of happened. While I was learning the accordion, I'm still learning obviously, but while I was learning there's a leisure activities type exercise in the school curriculum on a Friday afternoon. And I thought, might as well, if anybody's interested in it, I had a couple of guys interested in learning it. And in fact, 3 or 4. So I offered that as a leisure activity. And it was quite funny actually. I was sitting there with the accordion and they were there, and one accordion among the 4 of them, and they would play the wee bit of the tune and pass it over, and that was the way it started. A lot of people had actually picked up an accordion by that time, and they were kind of playing, but they needed some kind of direction to play with both hands and to be a wee bit more adventurous with the bass and to learn more tunes and put tunes together into sets and things like that.
Chan an an Tiree go bhain war agur teacher an brosnachol ferdinach. h-Alba van nu Seoir Traidiseanta ag mór an dine cluicheadair an amalagin. Ha Donald Shaw van Holland Capper Kelly a kainachel na lesanige.
Mentors are hugely important in the traditional music scene. I think they make all the difference. Yeah, certainly someone like Neil Sinclair who taught me, he taught a lot of pupils in the area of Connell and Oban. And you know, he had real passion for the music. So in a way, I wouldn't have called him a teacher. You know, he could tell you technically how to play the instrument, but what he was passing on was a passion for the music. You know, I probably learnt more from him watching him play at Ceilidh's and stuff rather than actually sitting with him as a pupil.
I think a good teacher is vital because there's a point where especially as a kid, I think you would stop playing if you didn't have partly some weekly point, some reason why it is you need to practice. And before you start doing gigs, that's about the only reason. And like a lot of kids, I didn't really practice as much as I pretended. But even so, the fact that you're going back to this same place every week makes a huge difference. And somebody that's able to really save you years of exploring by showing you ways through and being a genuinely encouraging human being, I think that's invaluable. I don't know that I would play the accordion if I hadn't had the teacher that I had.
Whatever instrument you play, there have always been these people who are real standard bearers for that instrument, and they are the people that inspire a whole generation. And if you have one person like on Tiree, on an island like that, it can change the whole mindset and it can change the whole community.
Hiad Bhogsa I dhéanamh van sa iomadh sa 19 diag agus scoile fheighn na Ranyorbe. Has ga chhlechgu is an imig jiffer steile de Ceòl an in imig jiffer Duaisean. Han Bhogsa I bhí stéite an nalabbe for hoiseach na fiche de fliin a chhlechgu go cumante mar instrument is an Ceòl Traidiseanta. Chur na hat inniu cluiche Bhogsa in áte na fiile Nionna Peep.
I think it chose me because of my upbringing, really. There was always traditional music around in the house. My dad played the accordion, he still does, and my mum and dad have a dance band, you know, weddings and balls and all that kind of thing. So yeah, from a really early age, you know, my dad was always playing in the kitchen. There was always people dropping by for Ceilidh's, and it was just always there.
When I was young, there was a crofter that lived just next to our house in Beagan, and he was a bit of a crazy guy, a real character. You know, you tend to always look up to Highland characters. And he had this crazy collie dog, but that used to run around, and you know, he had a caravan. He'd sit in the caravan, and you'd walk in, and he'd have this accordion, big 120 bass accordion sitting on the floor, and he would pick it up and he would start playing, and the dog would go crazy. But I think I was completely enchanted by the instrument. It was something, just all the buttons, the keys. I kind of would just sit and look at it and go, how does that work? How's it, you know? And I think the sound that came out of it was so big and so kind of cinematic for when you're a young person. You know, it's such a kind of great thing to see and to listen to. And so, you know, I went to my mum and I said, could I try that?
It's a really versatile instrument. You've got the bass hand accompaniment, you've got the melody hand, and you've got the different voices. You can become different things that you choose to become. And it is hilarious. It's comical because you can do all those different things. But it can also be a really genuinely emotional and serious instrument as well.
It wasn't my own choice to start playing the accordion. My parents actually strapped me into it at the age of 8 years old. I didn't even know what an accordion was. I remember watching TV, lying on the floor one day as my mother came in and said, "Look, I've got the lady on the phone, do you want to play the accordion or not?" And I said, "What's an accordion?" She went, "Right, you start next week."
My dad played accordion, and so he basically gave me an accordion when I was about 6, 7 years old, and like every wee boy just wanted to be like his daddy, so that's really how I got into the whole thing.
My father plays concertina, so that was how I started. And the accordion, because I thought it was funny, and I still do, to be honest. I thought that's a kind of funny, happy noise. It's louder than the concertina. What that says about my ego clash with my father, I don't know.
The accordion was it wasn't forced on me as such, but it was given to me as a gift when I was 3, the Christmas before my 4th birthday. It was a toy accordion in my Christmas sock, and my mum said that I just played "Oh Susanna" or something on it, and she and my father decided I should go to lessons and develop whatever this kind of little nugget of talent was, and they sent me to lessons, and that was it. I really had no control over it.
I think my first memory of the accordion was a guy, Murray Omond, who was in Gordon's band, playing at the hall in Tiree, and I was only a wee boy, and there's a picture of me just sort of stood at the front of the stage just looking at Murray playing, and I think that's sort of my first memory of the accordion. But I just remember being certain that's what I wanted to do. As soon as you reached 8 years of age, you could go to the fhèin in Tiree, and that was my first accordion lesson at the fhèin in Tiree.
Hug mis Bhogsa Ciùil go duine cluicheadair duine cultachtaí the Bally Skerrvore Innis a Skipinnish agus Campbell a Gunna Sound duine mar sin agus a mis seolting in a duine sin agus fa mi giri vi cluich I eiongantach mar a bhaíotsan.
Fechna dúcha jounsich kuchemokse is on fhèin hollachas. Gachluches on an cartenakke ans na tehinóste, jog a meintje a valle, charomor an gachluch is on bibio janevas.
Before television, people gathered in a house, a ceilidh house, any house where there's music and singing, and the button box would come out, and there'd be a song here and a tune there, and people just kind of learn just to play in houses, not necessarily their own house, but other folks' houses, and entertained each other.
There's a huge number of good box players in Tiree that you never really hear, but it's an integral part of music in Tiree. There's loads of guys that'll have a tune in the house, they'll bring the box out at a party, and a lot of them are better than the guys like yourselves that you know that are a bit better known, you know.
Maar hij veel niet dit en je denkt, het hij de cluicheadair in downskins de machine, ach die dag nach hier de zon, je de zon vaak al in je denkt, ach is hij kom maar dat de behe je mag keel in nering.
Als je eerst gaat raken met mijn huis, gaat leven als de geel de goedmarkt gaat. Niet op al jas. Ach, met de chionn is toen je hij niet meer wel echt goed is. Ik zou je maar hopen je dat die is misschien aan voorste, waar veel meer lopen chionn doos ook. Als een beetje een kruisje hakken, had toen al wat ik in de ene je kruis zo veel meer geel door dan het hoofd.
Gurich Billy in Eilean, cluicheadair an maintir Tiree, ag na Duaisean Ceòl. Nuad a gag Campbell mac I ligain Tiree, hiddig upper Tír Bhogsa Bhogsa Ceòl Traidiseanta. Bhogsa Bho Gunna Sound an an Neach-teagaisg Ciùil, agus hat bhí cluicheadair h-Alba von Duaisean. Sin misneach don áigerí as in Eilean. Le lesochach mór von Chuckas ge Gordon agus ag Neach hainis cumasach de chuid bí beo I dhéanamh as Ciòl. Sé inis mac fáil von Holland Skipinnish in achluicheadair a Tiree I galaf go Tír mór. I bharach gur a Ciòl héin a Skipinnish idir bhí sarabhachal am an gníomhachas cuideach.
If you enjoy something, you get good tuition and you get the right encouragement, you can't really fail to progress in it. Music and the accordion playing in Tiree was fairly common. I mean, the Murray Oman band was well known in Tiree. There was Billy the Box, Billy McLean playing. Campbell Brown of the Gunna Sound band was playing a lot, both on and off Tiree, and so there's quite a rich musical scene there already.
Leis bhísneach go huad inas von Ciòl, chudáad chos Company Clary agus dáthaid céili an san nápan agus I Dhearastan, chularí Andra Stevenson a chaniche san olthaid an Glasgow.
Okay, we're going to play An File the Loam, which is the Tiree national anthem. Okay.
Gordon's just, I think over the years he's probably taught 80% of Tiree the accordion at one point, I would think. There's so many folk I've speak to said they went to Gordon at some point for lessons, maybe didn't like it, but Gordon was never the sort that would, it would be up to the person probably to say, well, I don't want to carry on anymore. He wouldn't say you're not coming back or anything like that, so he's just such an easy guy to sort of, for him to teach you and to go on with as well,
Caroi ma teacher scholar, vai go ma feuilletje nach is vai gel nach die aangegeven tosh uit de zon wie ga jongens gehören. Hij doet dat cluicheadair. Dan werkste cliù haroi crwy ormse.
Tá Gordon teacher meervelig. Haro a riomh crwy ost, vai go mas soch in a vag at hekish. Sa mis is muid go sin kutermach. Und hau ook, hanjelu giri gewil duine trot drucht. Hau giri gewil at soch, a sin mar a vag Gordon a vag am hekish.
One of the majorly positive aspects of Gordon's tuition was he never dictated how you played anything. He taught you the tune and really left it up to your own interpretation and how to then perform that tune. And I think it's a great way to allow individual musicality to come out.
And sometimes we would go in and we wouldn't even play a note for about 15 minutes. We would talk about football and things like that and everything, but that was part of him. As it wasn't just all about music and having that ability just to, as a teacher and having a bond, but that with somebody was amazing as well.
I like what I do, and they probably feed off the fact that I am enjoying teaching them. So we're not talking about teachers and pupils, we're talking about people playing the accordion, maybe friends almost at the end of the day. When Skipinnish started, Angus MacPhail inspired Daniel Gillespie, who became Skerrvore, and Daniel has inspired youngsters to follow him.
Bhuanich Skerrvore yn dúis is an cólan bia na bliana ag na trads an na 2000 sa húntíag. Hat trang a cluich suas a sias na dúcha agus a fech an thir. Hat a cluiu Ceòl Traidiseanta.
I left school to study sport at first, and then we started gigging at that point of time and toured with the band that Skipinnish had put us on our first tour. So we started to get a taste for doing all the sort of wee venues and halls and pubs and stuff. But even at that point of time, I still had no idea that I wanted to be a full-time musician or play music full-time, so I started training as a plumber. But then we just sort of got so busy with the band, but I couldn't be seen to be taking days off to travel to go and do a gig. So we just I ended up getting a place at the academy, studying there for 3 years, and by that time the band was sort of progressing, where now we're full-time and gigging all the time. I just never expected to be a full-time musician at all.
Chai Skerrvore chláirigh le Skipinnish Records agus thug sin mis nach de dhéinealach an a tiidig.
It actually happened, it sort of snowballed and it's kept going from there, which we're very, very fortunate with. But it's the same way that I think with Gordon and he's passed that on to Angus and everything, that sort of enthusiasm and learning about being in a band and running it, almost treating it like a career and a business. That seems to have spread on as well for people, because it's a lot of folk wouldn't realise how much is maybe involved in it as well. It's not just the sort of glamour of doing the gigs and the fun and games that's involved with that. There's obviously all the other sides to it as well.
Ha barach gúine a cluiche Bhogsa agus Ceòl Traidiseanta inniu, a cha ban an ngónaí mar sin a bhaid.
Let's make no mistake, the accordion was not cool growing up. I think certainly today and nowadays with all the face movements and everything else and the real sort of revival in traditional music, it's quite cool, but it was not cool when I was growing up in Speenbridge and used to get an awful lot of stick for playing the box, which was Well, looking back, it's great. It's quite funny how it's all worked out. But at the time, yeah, it was quite hard to keep practicing and playing when you were getting a bit of ribbon from all your pals outside as well at the same time.
Yeah, I didn't shout from the rooftops that I was playing accordion. Definitely not when I was at high school. There was a kind of bunch of us that eventually ended up being Capercaillie, actually, because we had a real shared kind of love of traditional music. So no, I would never carry my accordion into the school, put it that way.
In a school of 2,500 people, I had not one person that even played folk music, that I could chum about with. It's just wonderful to see people playing the accordion, playing the bagpipes, playing the fiddle. Scottish music has taken a massive turn in the last 25, 30 years.
But I was really geeky, so therefore I wasn't aware of the downside of it, so I just quite enjoyed the technical difficulty of it and the music making without realising what a twit it made me look.
I was lucky enough to be in a wee clique of people that were into the same thing, and we kind of all stuck together, and it was strength in numbers. And through high school especially, we would spend a lot of time in the practice room and in the rehearsal rooms, just having a bash and playing what I would probably loosely describe as Celtic rock.
Ba fé am féinine a bhos gan scáil agus bheit mí ciúil an a Bhogsa seo agus a ddíoch scrísal agus ha céile am bhabalach sa scáil agus bheit sticker a Bhogsa agus bheit gra lift it, I can hardly play it. So agus mé go sin os a chéimhin.
Cúla bhán bhí cluiche Bhogsa. Harú triplaigin ríomh acamsa cliù má déine macáil scas go rómar cluiche Bhogsa. Bhí go má fás nach ha chréis mé go triplaigin mar sin na Duaisean bí.
Ha buamach gawn gan y tehin sinju a ha fasge sol mór ostak sy'n Eilean Sciánach. Sna Hollanich ag a cholasje y goal gach corym y fi clwych. Si eilean ag fadjan scolar ile Gorstein ag ag tüdych le Bogsa na live. Y fel Amazon sohoriche ag Elias on y cwch ciúil.
Ha díach costar me bhí cluich. Ha díach cursa ciúil ag samar rostig. Ach in drás ha díach costar me bhí cluich colorí dífa daine. Díach a bhí géonschach agus hí sin dí hachar is ag díach na céad blianachan so. I've nickname acum ag an scoil, so nu a hanna mí an heo agus fa déine cút éile de cíla an bha, bha costum go agus. Well, ha mí is go chuointe má an bhasa chu is áte gan mar sin, gan mar sin, so ag má éimig.
Siad na ballich Trail West yn Golan y Zúre a had a hína macha tjydych. Biad dyn an y clwychans yn triangel pars de glaschu par yn bína gael y crynioch cónlach. Iawn sich ian mac o goin yn Bogsa cwtsid i eli fo stúdych Gorstein. Ha eisnyn is sydd tír mór y gamas sydd na skillenege i lesoch ag olhau an yn glaschu.
I'm ag an olhau am ag Royal Conservatoire of Scotland agus am I clwych an call an Trail West. When I've sa fún scáil, bha mi géirí clwych a Bhogsa go professionta. Bha mi géirí bhí clwych it féic alap, but it féic an tell. I mean, sin earned na hamas and a hacam, nish.
Ha clown hydig bhí gáil páiste go bhád thar blianachin a tart coartbis inadal go iad náisianta. Ha ian agus éili bhí fartbis a neu chéile go bhád thart na blianachin Buaidh. I gamas dúis a hortagachi for coartbis a Bhogsa.
Yes, well, I think there was a certain amount of rivalry, although they learned the accordion at different times, and Ian was maybe a couple of years ahead of Ailey in starting the accordion. But they were in the same class in school. They played together at various things, but they also competed against each other. I suppose the climax of the rivalry came at Stornoway last year when Ian was first and Ailey was second in the mod.
Taobh líanaí a mi hín is Ailey in uí cacha chéile agus thuaise ön puig na sé na thuair mise ach an bliana in uí ag steán a bheith chuair mi hín hiad áit agus thuair Ailey an dána áit. A sin na seolting dioch go más a bhógs amantí a go hiún fa cluicheadair an fó féig h-Alba sin agus thuair mi hín Ailey na áitin na séir. Bha mé úsach nearah a go hiúns go tar duine elsan coarpis ach sé farach go má bheith na buanach in nuí Ailey fé mi gra.
Ag bhád an an dún óin an na dáhíle sa gá díag, rain Ailey a chúis agus I léi nuas.
Ailey, I'm sure, was determined to win the mod because it was her last year in that age group. So she won it, and that was completion of job sort of thing.
Let's hear it, ladies and gentlemen, Phil and Ali.
Dúcha ha cluicheadair an Bhogsa ann le dóin cluicheadair iallachte. Ha duine go trí go déanamh scarach cluicheadair von chosnadh agus chosnadh h-Alba. Ha Phil Cunningham I míoch seo.
Scotland has always borrowed from other musics, and Scotland's music has shaped, which is why you get an east-west divide, if you like, because the East Coast was very much influenced by the courts, the Italians and the French coming over to play for James the Fourth and Fifth in Stirling. So all East Coast music tends to be a bit more structured, a little bit more classical. All the dances are for sets of maybe 8, 10, 12 people, whereas in the West Coast, it's one-on-one. I remember talking to Fergie MacDonald about his style of accordion playing, and he said that it was very much influenced by Ireland. And I said, well, how so? He said, well, he got Radio Éireann reception better than he got BBC Scotland. So he was listening to Irish radio more as a kid.
If you walked into a pub, you can usually tell roughly where the player's from or who he's influenced by through the tunes that he's playing and the style that he plays it.
If I walked into a bar and heard an accordion player playing, I would hopefully be able to tell roughly where they come from, but it is quite difficult these days because the more mass media there is, the more homogenised it becomes. Certainly originally the East Coast playing was, I think, followed very much the fiddle style of playing, whereas the West Coast style is a bit freer, a bit swingier, and a lot of the West Coast music comes from the pipes. So if I heard somebody playing particularly a 2/4 march, then I'd be pretty sure that they came from the West Coast somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's more generic now, but I could still probably have a good idea of where they were brought up musically, particularly between the East and the West. There's a kind of slightly more laid-back, lilting style to the West still, I think. But like language and the accent is a bit more jagged in the East Coast.
agus ar style is sé contemporary a tar duine cluich ruúten nas úre ag conservatoire an an tíach was na cluich ruúten a bhain as tradiisianta. So han style ac am a gahar a fat na tíide ha mis a smurging ha mi fhèin lesan na Ian Muir agus a style a Jeffrey agus an ha mi torst na style ag duine eile na bhrain an style ac am hén stocha.
I mean, I've got a very, very different accordion playing style to Daniel Gillespie, for example, who's, we're obviously both from Tiree. He's got a different accordion playing style from Ian Smith. Michael from the Battersea Boys has got a very different style playing the accordion to his brother, you know, so certainly there are regional styles, but within these regions there are differences, you know, from each individual.
Hannig gyda West Coast style a hagam se, agus a heg a huludinge I dang ha Gordon gyma mesal yn doi hwych ag Bobby McLeod. So am is me ha gyda sin ting Harris sy doi hwych ag a huludinge fwn I lang. Hannings gyda gyma West Coast, is gyma tradisianta.
A style ag a hi ag hwla duine cad. A fwr go da gwynio y sanya gos a hanw style achga. Y style fa fys y dwrnan gwrdd o'ch eisiau style ag Bobby McLeod nach mai am. Se style kerst am eisiau smeg am agasan. Fer ar o hwdwch post am a cloich fa I cloich gy kerst. Ar o'r hwyd ar o'r afawl.
Bobby McLeod. I'm very well, Andrew. How are you? I'm fine, but the point in question is this. What does a rakish Highlandman look like? Oh, well, don't look at me. Well, you're a Highlandman. Aye, but I'm no rakish. What is it anyway? Well, it's something, and I don't know what it is, but it's not that anyway.
Hai Bobby McLeod o hwgal an y mwle agos hannig acw adda na dwche mar haar chluicheadair as jay yn arna cogi. Gas an aml is on a fi chluiche Bhogsa an a style pípadach, rwyd dy fag yma Jeffrey agus úr ag gynawn. Chain ceol ag I chrúil gan thul program yn television mar a White Heather Club. Ma fa Jimmy Shand rwch gychw ceol na galdach, a Bobby McLeod gar iddif rwch gychw ceol na geldach.
Bobby McLeod, well, he's dum buddy dum dum daddy dum buddy dum dum da daddy dum dum da no shan buddy ding 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 dum piddy. Now I know that's a 2/4 and a 6/8, but Shan's thing was very regular. And the dancers loved that kind of thing. Whereas Bobby McLeod had this, you know, he broke it up into the kind of pipe idiom, you know, long notes, short notes, and gave them the value he thought they should. I think one of the things that changed was folk like Phil and Sandy Bracken too, and a lot of the younger players, their technique is a lot better than the older punters like myself, you know, that have been pretty self-taught. A lot of these guys all went to kind of pretty severe lessons, you know, so they would learn correct fingering and practising the fingering, you know, whereas going back, I mean, like Shan would be self-taught, Bobby McLeod was self-taught, I'm largely self-taught. Many of the folk in my area were self-taught.
I would say people who play by ear. Maybe I'm biased, but I think people who play by ear have got a better feel for the music instead of people that are reading it. I'm not saying that people that have learned to read it don't develop their own style, which I mean that would be very wrong. I think that's what it is. It's the way you feel the music. It comes from the heart.
You like to think that you've got your own individual style. Obviously, I've been influenced by a lot of different players, but essentially I would say, you know, I am a West Coast musician. I do come from the West Coast. I come from Buaidh in the Highlands, and I have grown up listening to that music, but I've also been exposed to a whole lot more. But I like to think that my style, I think especially from having learnt the pipes first, I think I have been very influenced by the pipe dressings and because I didn't have a teacher, I don't think I became someone else straight away. I had that freedom to go in lots of different directions, but hopefully I think I've still kept the idea that I'm from the Highlands, and that's where it first started.
An na núine garid had tréil wester an ceolacha a hort go imich jiffer cearna yen Duaisean. Bhfuil bethe an rád de accordion na ballí?
Siúd dúas of my helna bhí cluicheadair an cála, sin dul h-Alba, sa sin éidir bhí cluicheadair na sasin da chud a scúteach. How conneach is the duine is how feiching hatchinen nach bíú feiching mar a cluicheadh so then had a duine caiit dást agus had a feiching lút a meachsa ceolaat sin lút mar an cúteach a cásta rúm. Had tá duine tíoch an glaschaid is bíú ga feiching an san eilean nu an sa fart bar so triangle mar a had a gra agus had tá duine tíoch Nuair a sinne cluich an sa fart nu an san eile, tá duine tíne meach ga reichting.
Charú áireneoch de Ceòl Traidiseanta an eilean I dtíobh cho falainn sa hás a láindiú. Lug immerden mar fésin den Gael, spionnig an Ceòl, a tord corman de varach clonne inal an Ciùil ansachach.
Well, you go into the park bar. There's a session on a Thursday night, and there's guys just coming out the woodwork. You know, loads of young, girls as well, box players, and fiddlers and guitarists. And they're not just playing one instrument, they're playing multi-instruments, you know, the drums or keyboards or guitars. And one minute you're seeing a guy playing the box, next minute he's playing the fiddle, and, you know, amazing.
How does that make you feel?
Jealous.
When you see young guys, 13, 14-year-old at a standard much better than the likes of myself can play now, it's just incredible, and you imagine how good they will be and what they will do, how much they will bring on traditional music in 10 years' time, you know. So it's very exciting. It's probably the most exciting time to be involved in traditional music for certainly living memory.
Definitely the fhèin movement is a major factor. Just that whole immersion thing, weekends where people come and they meet other people their own age that have a love and passion for the music, and they get involved, and that spread like wildfire. And actually that's all it needed to ignite it, was this sense of confidence in the music, understanding that this music wasn't just for an older generation, it wasn't just something a little bit odd. You know, actually this is our own music, this is our culture, this is our heritage, this is a living, breathing thing.
It's almost as if we now understand where we're from and what we're about musically. I think, you know, maybe in the 50s and 60s, even the early 70s, people's perception of Scottish music was what the media gave them.
It's great. I think to have lots of people playing music means that there's people playing in pubs, there's people playing you know, in their homes, there's people having musical evenings, there's people playing at Village Hall Ceilidhs. I think maybe, you know, on the amateur side of things, or on the side where, you know, you from a community level, that's brilliant. I think maybe the only downside is that just now, especially when you're in a time when venues are being squeezed, festivals are being squeezed, the number of musicians that are professional is quite high, and I would say that, you know, the scene's it's not completely diluted, but there's probably not enough work in this country.
There are now a couple of generations of professional folk musicians. It doesn't seem like an impossibility now that you might go and play folk music for a living. And I think one of the possible problems, and it's definitely not bad that there are so many great young players, but the audience isn't necessarily growing to go with that. So my only fear about it, and it's not a great fear, is that there are more players than there are gigs, but I think that's always been true to a certain extent.
But we're never going to be rock stars, you know. I think that's the truth behind the scene. But we don't do it for that. You do it for the love of the music and the pride that comes with playing something that, you know, essentially is derived from music that people have been listening to for thousands, you know, hundreds, thousands of years.
That's great stuff. That's excellent. 3 tracks.
Dé heachtas na the status Gordon Connell. Le córas ciad a cluiche Bhogsa is saoibh Gordon, dé eileanis.
Connell urit sin de chluine sa Scotland na háileann do síos. Ach, ha mismuidir gur spionach go déir as a cheol chumas a dul. Fat a cuid gan eilean a tréwnach a gúman a dul.
Can you mismuidir go bí duine san beagan an opera rein Gordon? Hij dicht op oorzaak groeien kunnen zeggen zijn we checken steunen ach hij met dagen gebied een boksen de goed als zo samen cheer
Misschien je weer kunt bij kutje ding maar als de brok en ik Gordon bees en anders zo'n Greece haast hij is een haast jail nog we Neach-teagaisg Ciùil.
It'd be a real shame to think that would ever stop, and I think certainly the musicians that have come out of Tiree, there's a duty in us to make sure that we ensure that never stops either, you know.
It's great having, we've got Gordon and all these people teaching, but I think we need to take a part and help. If there's any help needed up there, we need to go back and, you know, so if we need to go up and teach ourselves or help advise to get teachers up as well if that's needed, because we need to keep it going strong. The kids need to have the opportunities.
Well, ideally, when I retire from teaching accordion, one or other of my pupils will be living in Tiree and might want to do it. I hope somebody will take it up and keep it going. It's quite difficult to foresee that happening because there's not many full-time jobs in Tiree, certainly none for a musician.
Hvis vi går sine falken, går sine går forstnach, as sine sons gunei ne den yok ha fasus en dras gunei ietsen in en kodam a hushinge. We hushinge a kodam haring ha fin kluich sine needing.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was profoundly shocked when I was nominated for Tutor of the Year, and I hope the people who nominated me thought I could teach the accordion better than Anne Widdicombe could dance. I've spent most of my life in Tiree, and it's not really, this award doesn't go to me really, it's an award for the fantastic musical tradition in Tiree that's been there over the years, and dare I say a special wee thanks to Facebook. Thank you all very much.
I was very proud to win it, but I was amazed. I didn't think folk would know about me enough to vote for me.
Han hadfyn ddigune a ha cluiche Bhogsa I dolm fios, agus ha baroch a tort úrum gan joustramaach. Ha fugin haas down gata a ha fanacheth.
Yeah, I think it is a funny instrument, you know, and I have no shame in that. I'm not really scared of being laughed at.
You've got that, I guess, that bond between you that you play such a mad instrument as the accordion.
No, I'm always delighted when you see a box case. You're always happy, partly because you're ostracised by everybody else, so you might as well be happy to see each other, you know.
Well, all music, I think, is fantastic for the soul, and certainly the accordion. I mean, a lady, just when I was on tour recently, a lady was saying it's almost like the accordion is part of you. And I really do feel like that. I think when you really become at one with your instrument, that is the case. I actually dropped my accordion by accident the other day, and I said "ow" as though it was myself, which is kind of quite sad, really, but it is.
What's the definition of a gentleman? Someone who can play the accordion but doesn't.
That to me sums up, people's feeling, because I like the fact that, you still get described as a gentleman at the end of it.
But the accordionist's definition of a gentleman is somebody that knows that joke and won't tell it.
Fa harw na cluicheadair fhèin ionsaigte, agus hanach gan go cluicheadair. Harw eice ach fóst a hallan vic agus fa di cluiche fat na hainche, agus fa na dawnsichen na gin strip the will agus na waltsichen agus paliglide hula downsa go na fóst.
When I moved to Scotland, part of my naturalisation process when I came across the border with the accordion was to sign a 2/4 waiver. I'm not allowed to play 2/4 marches. The Strathspey was acceptable, but I'm afraid I can't do the 2/4. I'm sorry.
I told you it's a serious business, this accordion play.